There is a kind of grief that doesn't look like grief. It looks like a man standing in the rain outside a private jet, phone still warm from the call that ended everything. It looks like steady hands signing documents, a pressed suit at a funeral, eyes that stay dry when everyone expects them to break. Kang Jae-won had spent 6 years building a life without his family's name. Without the empire. Without the suffocating weight of a throne he never wanted. He was good at leaving. He was less prepared for what happens when leaving is no longer an option. When a brother is dead, a family is lying, and the only person who might tell him the truth is the one person who has every reason to destroy him. Some inheritances can't be refused. Welcome to life in stories, where power has a price, love leaves scars, and every secret changes destiny. If you crave intense drama, shocking betrayals, and emotional twists that stay with you long after the story ends, you're in the right place. Subscribe, and step into a world where nothing is ever simple. The rain found him first. It came sideways against the oval window, streaking the glass in long silver threads, blurring the distant lights of Incheon far below as the private jet began its final descent into the city. Kang Jae-won watched it without moving. His whiskey sat untouched on the wide leather armrest. His phone screen had gone dark exactly 3 minutes ago, but the call had already ended. Already done its damage. His older brother was dead. The official statement was already drafted. He knew this because his father's chief of staff had told him so before carefully explaining the stated cause. Car accident. Mountain road. Wet conditions. A tragedy. The kind of tragedy that happened to families, to anyone, at any time. The kind that required no further investigation. But the private whisper, the one delivered in the same breath, in a lower register, meant only for him, told a different story. Break failure. Deliberate. Engineered. Someone had made sure Kang Min-jun would not make it home from that dinner. Jae-won did not cry. He had not cried in years. He had trained that impulse out of himself the way you train a bad habit. Through repetition, through shame, through enough mornings staring at a ceiling deciding what kind of man you would become. He had left Seoul at 23 with 2 suitcases and a silence so complete that no one had dared call it what it was. Abandonment. Cowardice. The younger son proving, finally, what everyone had always suspected. He had fled the empire. Haesong Group. 17 subsidiaries. Construction, pharmaceuticals, shipping, media. His father, Chairman Kang Byung-soo, had built it from a single shipping yard into a colossus that touched nearly every major industry in the country. And Min-jun, perfect, composed, relentlessly competent Min-jun, had been raised to inherit all of it. Groomed. Prepared. Celebrated. Jae-won had been the other one. The one who asked too many questions. Who pushed back at dinner tables. Who refused to perform obedience as though it were an art form. His father had never said the word disappointment directly. He hadn't needed to. It lived in the pauses, in the redirected eye contact, in every conversation that moved around him instead of toward him. He had left. And for 6 years, that had been enough. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs and breathed slowly through his nose and watched the rain continue to fall. The funeral was a production. Cameras lined 3 deep at the perimeter of the estate. Haesong's PR team had coordinated with the major outlets. Tasteful coverage, dignified framing, the appropriate language of national grief for a family of such standing. The shareholders had sent enormous flower arrangements with their names printed in bold. Rival executives arrived in their finest black, mouths set in careful expressions of condolence, eyes doing something entirely different. Jae-won stood at the edge of his own family and felt like a stranger who had learned the customs from a book. The casket was closed. He was glad for that. He watched the faces. A habit he'd kept from childhood, when reading rooms felt safer than participating in them. He clocked the sympathy that curdled too quickly into calculation. The men already doing math, who would fill the seat, who would move up, who stood to gain from the sudden absence at the center of the board. And then he saw her. She stood on the opposite side of the receiving line, dressed in black that had clearly been chosen with precision. Nothing ostentatious, nothing careless, every detail of her grief carefully curated to the setting. Han So-yeon. Min-jun's fiancée for 3 years. The woman his brother had called the only person who had ever honestly challenged him. She was not crying. She held a single white chrysanthemum against her ribs with both hands, and her eyes were forward, and her jaw was set, and she looked like a woman who had already moved past grief into something colder and more purposeful. And then she looked at him. Their eyes met across the casket, across the flowers, across 6 years and a distance that had never been measured in kilometers. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Maybe 4. In those seconds, he understood everything she wasn't saying. You left. You left him here alone. And now look. Blame. Clean and quiet and absolute. He looked away first. His father did not wait for the reception to end. The announcement came through official channels before the guests had finished their condolence tea, a brief internal memo, swiftly leaked, as all carefully curated leaks are. The younger son, Kang Jae-won, would be assuming his brother's role effective immediately. The transition of succession. The family united in tragedy. The empire would hold. Jae-won found his father in the private study afterward. He kept his voice low. I am not him. His father sat behind the desk that had always seemed too large for a single man. He looked older. He also looked immovable. No, Chairman Kang said. You are not. But you are what remains. I have a life. Outside of this. You have an escape. That is different. A pause. You don't have a choice, Jae-won. He left the room without answering. That night, alone in the bedroom that had once been his, the walls still holding the ghost of who he used to be, he found the envelope placed carefully on his pillow. His name. Minute-jun's handwriting. No date. He turned it over for a long time before finally opening it. Inside, a USB drive, black and featureless. And below it, a single strip of paper. 7 words, written in the quick, certain hand of a man who had known something was coming. Trust no one inside this house. Jae-won sat in the dark and did not move. The USB drive held 4 folders. Jae-won opened them in order, sitting at his brother's desk in the dark, the laptop's glow the only light. The first folder, wire transfers. Hundreds, spanning 3 years, moving between accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, Singapore. Clean on the surface. The kind of transfers that required both patience and access, someone who understood Haesong's internal architecture from the inside. The second folder, board meeting minutes. Annotated. Names circled in red, line items flagged with question marks in Minute-jun's precise handwriting. Votes that passed without objection. Contracts awarded to subsidiaries that shouldn't have existed. Numbers that didn't resolve against public filings. The third folder, a spreadsheet mapping offshore accounts to individuals. 7 board members. 2 names Jae-won recognized from the funeral. Men who had shaken his hand and spoken warmly of Minute-jun's legacy. The fourth folder, 1 document. 2 pages. Near the bottom, a name highlighted in yellow. He stared at it for a long time. Then he closed the laptop. She found him before he found her. He was walking the east corridor the following morning when she stepped from an alcove, deliberate, positioned, the kind of appearance that is never accidental. Han So-yeon. Still in black. Composed with the precision of someone who had decided exactly what she was willing to show. We need to talk, she said. Not here. The room she led him to was a small meeting space on the 4th floor, rarely used, overlooking the rear garden. She locked the door. She did not sit. Your brother did not die in a car accident. I know, he said. Something shifted in her expression. Fractional, barely visible. She had expected to surprise him. The recalculation happened quickly. The USB. Not a question. He left it for me. I know. I helped him build it. She moved toward the window. We worked together for 4 months. Quietly. He didn't want to involve anyone else. He was afraid of who might be listening. But he involved you. Yes. Why? She turned, and for a moment he saw something beneath the composure, not grief exactly, but its shape, the place where grief had been before she transformed it into something useful. Because I was already looking, she said. Before he was. The silence had weight. Jae-won measured it carefully. She had come to him, which meant she needed something. But her posture, the distance she maintained, the way she stood near the only exit, she didn't trust him. "You think I'll leave," he said. "You've done it before. This is different." "Is it?" She folded her arms. "You disappeared for 6 years while your brother carried everything alone. Now he's dead. I have no way of knowing if you'll still be here in 2 weeks when whoever did this realizes the investigation didn't die with him." The words landed cleanly. He didn't flinch. "What do you need from me?" "The same thing you need from me. I know the board politics, the internal relationships, which executives are compromised and which are merely afraid. You have the legal authority, the name, the chair. Together we have something. Separately we are targets." It was not warmth. It was architecture. He respected it. "A temporary alliance," he said. "Don't mistake it for anything else." The board moved against him within 48 hours. Not overtly. Haesung's board was too practiced for open aggression. It came as concern. A competency review, framed delicately, citing the unprecedented nature of the succession. Simultaneously, a financial outlet published a piece questioning Jae-won's qualifications. Unattributed sources. The article moved faster than organic journalism moves. Someone had written it before he landed. Meanwhile, Daesan Holdings, Haesung's chief rival, filed regulatory complaints against 2 subsidiaries the same morning. Unrelated to each other, both requiring immediate internal attention. Jae-won watched the coordination from his brother's office and understood, this wasn't defensive maneuvering. These were strikes. Whoever was inside had known Minute-jun was building a case. They were not reacting to an investigation. They were eliminating anyone who might continue one. Someone was moving too fast. Which meant the traitor knew someone was still looking. He found the voice memo by accident. Buried in Minute-jun's digital archive, labeled with a date 8 months prior, no title. He almost skipped it. His brother's voice filled the room, calm, deliberate. "If something happens to me, and you're hearing this, things moved faster than I expected. I need you to protect So-yeon. Whatever you think of her, whatever she tells you or doesn't, protect her. She doesn't know everything. And what she doesn't know could get her killed." The recording ended. She doesn't know everything. He thought about the woman who had locked a door and delivered a strategic proposal without her voice breaking once. Who claimed she had been investigating before Minute-jun even started. Who held a chrysanthemum at a funeral with both hands and never once cried. What was she hiding? Or precisely, what was being hidden from her, and why had Minute-jun chosen not to tell her? The security lead delivered findings at midnight. Brake tampering confirmed. The mechanism accessed 31 hours before the accident, in the private garage beneath the family estate. Restricted access. The primary server footage had been manually erased. But a backup feed existed. An auxiliary camera, installed 2 years ago, nearly forgotten. The footage was recoverable. They pulled it together. Jae-won, So-yeon, and one officer Jae-won had decided to trust provisionally. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. The figure entering the garage moved with the ease of someone who belonged there. Someone from the immediate family. So-yeon's hand went still. Jae-won looked at the frozen frame and felt something cold settle in the room, the sensation of a question becoming an answer no one was ready for. He reached over and stopped the footage before either of them said the name. The name on the document was Kang Byung-soo. His father. Jae-won read it 3 times. Not because he didn't understand it. Because some part of him was waiting for the meaning to change, for the letters to rearrange themselves into someone else, something explicable, a mistake buried deep in the data. They didn't. The offshore accounts traced back through 3 shell companies to a private holding registered under a name his father had used decades ago, before Haesung existed. Before the suits, the empire, the careful public architecture of a man above reproach. The money had been moving for 11 years. He sat alone with that number for a very long time. He requested no meeting. He simply walked into the chairman's private study the following morning and closed the door behind him. His father sat behind the desk with both hands flat on the surface, as though he had been expecting this. Perhaps he had. The offshore accounts. J1 didn't frame it as a question. 11 years. 17 transfers in the last fiscal year alone. His father said nothing. Minutjan found it. He was going to act on it. And now he's dead. The silence stretched. Outside, the estate gardens were grey and utterly still. The rain had returned. I did not kill your brother. The chairman's voice was measured. Not defensive. Not wounded. Measured, like a man who had spent decades learning to deliver difficult statements without inflection. Then explain the garage footage. I cannot. You cannot or you won't. Those are sometimes the same thing. His father finally looked up. The expression J1 found there was not guilt. It was not grief. It was something older and more complicated, the face of a man carrying a weight he had chosen and would not put down. I built everything in this room. Everything you were born into. The corruption you found is real. I won't insult you by denying it. But you think I would kill my own son over a financial disclosure? People have killed for less. You are not listening to me. I am listening very carefully. His father turned toward the window. Minutjan was not just gathering evidence about the accounts. He had found other things. Older things. Things that would not simply cost me my position. He paused. I knew what he had. I told him to stop. He refused. But I did not touch that car. The words were delivered with the absolute flatness of a man who believes himself completely. J1 studied him and found no seam to pull. No visible fracture. He left the room without another word. Soyeon was waiting in the corridor. Of course she was. He told you about the older files, she said. It was not a question either. The corridor seemed full of things that didn't require asking. What do you know about them? She turned and walked. He followed. She didn't speak again until they were outside, crossing the stone path along the east garden, the rain too light to matter. Minutjan found the financial corruption 8 months ago, she said. I was helping him document it. You know that already. What I didn't tell you is what he planned to do with it. Tell me now. He wasn't going to hand it to regulators quietly. He wasn't going to negotiate a private resolution with the board. She stopped walking. He was going to release everything publicly. Full disclosure. Every account, every name, every transaction. He believed the only way to dismantle the corruption was to make it impossible for anyone to contain. J1 let the silence sit before he spoke. Including evidence against our father. Including everything that would have sent your father to prison. And you knew this. I disagreed with it. Her voice didn't waver, but something in her posture did, subtle, almost imperceptible. I told him the exposure would destroy more than just the guilty. It would collapse subsidiaries, eliminate thousands of jobs, demolish supplier networks. It would punish people who had nothing to do with any of it. He believed that was a cost worth bearing. I did not. So you withheld this from me. I was still deciding how much to trust you. And now. She met his eyes. You deserve to know what your brother was. He walked alone for a long time after that. The empire his father had built on corruption. The brother who had discovered it and chosen demolition over compromise. The fiancé who had helped him build the case and then quietly pulled back from the edge. His own absence through all of it. 6 years gone while the ground shifted beneath a house he hadn't wanted to live in. Who was the villain? His father had stolen and called it preservation. Minutjan had threatened to burn everything and called it justice. Soyeon had chosen silence and called it strategy. And what had he done? He had run. He had called it freedom. He was still standing in the garden when his phone lit with a message from the security officer. 3 lines. He read it twice. The auxiliary footage had been traced to its access point. The garage credentials used that night, his father's biometric passcode, his father's registered entry sequence, had been accessed remotely. Not from the chairman's own devices. from an external terminal connected to the estate security system through a back channel that had been opened 14 months ago. The terminal was registered under a maintenance contractor. The contractor was a shell. The shell resolved, after 4 layers, to a single individual with authorized estate access. Han So-yun. Jae-won stared at the screen. The woman who had approached him. Who had proposed the alliance. Who had told him with unbroken composure that his brother did not die in a car accident. She had known. She had always known. Because she had been there. She was standing at the window when he entered. The gun was in her right hand, pressed flat against her sternum. Not raised. Not pointed at him. Pointed inward, at the place where a person keeps the things they cannot say aloud. He stopped 3 steps inside the door and neither of them spoke for a long moment. Put it down. You found the terminal trace, she said. So you think you know what happened. I know enough. You know the shape of it. Not the inside. She turned. Her eyes were dry. They had been dry since the funeral, since before the funeral, for reasons he was only now beginning to fully understand. Minute-jun found evidence that 2 board subsidiaries had been deliberately overleveraged. Not by your father. By someone using your father's internal authority. He traced it forward and found what it would trigger, a cascading collapse across 3 supplier networks. Thousands of employees. Pension funds. People who had absolutely nothing to do with the corruption. That's what he was going to expose. He knew the collapse was coming regardless. He wanted to control the narrative. Release everything publicly and frame the fall as justice. Let the stock crash, let the chips land where they needed to. He believed the story needed to be dramatic enough that no one could bury it afterward. Her voice was even, but he could hear what it cost her to keep it that way. I told him it was not justice. It was spectacle built on human casualties. He disagreed. We argued, a real argument, not a strategy session. He drove off alone into the dark. She paused. I had filed a maintenance report 2 weeks earlier. I noticed irregularities in the garage security system and flagged it through the estate's internal channel. No one acted on it. She glanced at the gun as though briefly reminding herself it was still there. I don't know if the brakes were already compromised when he drove away that night. I don't know if someone used my report to know exactly when and how to act. I only know that I argued with him and he got into the car and I never saw him alive again. Were you framed? I've asked myself that every single hour since the footage first surfaced. She set the gun carefully on the windowsill. I filed the report. The report exists. The back channel used my credentials. Whether someone built that entire architecture around me or whether it is coincidence that damns me, I cannot prove the difference. I am not certain I ever will. Jae-won crossed the room slowly. He picked up the gun and slipped it into his jacket pocket without a word. Then we will find who does know, he said. The answer had been in the board records all along. It took 2 days to trace the back channel to its origin. A relay bounced through So-yun's credentials from a completely separate source. A source with the kind of access that only 2 people inside Haesong possessed. One was the chairman. The other was Vice Chairman Oh Sung-tae. The man who had attended every family holiday for 30 years. Who had delivered Minute-jun's eulogy with practiced, seamless grief. Who had squeezed Jae-won's shoulder at the funeral and said quietly that Minute-jun had been like a son to him. The offshore corruption traced to shells registered in Oh Sung-tae's network, threaded through the chairman's name. Evidence planted to implicate the father. The back channel built through So-yun's credentials. Everything meticulously routed so that if the investigation ever reached its conclusion, it would find 2 destroyed names to carry the crime. He had wanted both heirs gone. A clear, unobstructed path to the chairmanship he had spent 30 years carefully performing indifference toward. He had almost succeeded. The decision lived inside Jae-won for 3 full days before he made it. To expose everything, the corruption, the orchestration, the vice chairman's architecture, it would trigger exactly what Minute-jun had predicted. Stock collapse. Supplier defaults. Thousands of people who had spent entire careers inside Haesong's walls would watch it fall apart. The family name would become a word people used to describe a particular kind of spectacular rot. To stay silent, bury Oh Sung-tae quietly, neutralize the board, let the empire absorb its wound privately. His brother's last act of faith in the truth would become another thing that had simply happened and been managed into silence. He thought about the voice on the memo. The certainty in it. The cost that certainty had already extracted from everyone around it. He picked up the phone and called the financial regulator. The stock dropped 41% in 3 days. Oh Sung-tae was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The board was dissolved by Friday. The chairman resigned and cooperated fully. Restructuring began the way all large things are rebuilt, slowly, painfully, with no guarantee of the shape they would eventually take. Jae-won sat in the chairman's office for the first time as its true occupant and found it fit him the way most inherited things fit, uncomfortably, with room in the wrong places. Months later, she appeared at the door. Not lovers. Not strangers. Something the language had no clean word for. Two people who had stood inside the same catastrophe and come out the other side changed in ways neither had asked for or chosen. He didn't look up. I never wanted this. Not to her. To the desk. To the window and its familiar rain. She leaned against the doorframe. Neither did he. He opened the archive on his phone. Pressed play. His brother's voice filled the room one final time. Calm, deliberate, already gone. Jae-won sat in the chair he had never wanted and listened until the recording ended and the room went quiet. Then he got to work. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, shocked you, or made your heart ache, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Life in Stories. More unforgettable drama, powerful secrets, and emotional journeys are waiting. Until the next story, stay curious and never underestimate hidden truths.